On December 26, 2025, something strange happened. The Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, its Foreign Minister Saar, and the President of the Republic of Somaliland signed a joint and mutual declaration, which means that Israel became the only nation in the world officially recognizing Somaliland as an independent and sovereign state. To most of us, Somaliland is a remote and confusing name. When we look at a map of the Horn of Africa, we often see a single entity labeled Somalia. That is because Somalia is the country that almost the entire world recognizes, now except Israel. But history is much more complex on the ground. It begins in the 19th century, when most of Africa was colonized by European powers. What we now call Somalia was then the Italian colony in the south, and in the north lies British Somaliland Protectorate. The British treated Somaliland as a protectorate, mostly interested in it as a source of livelihood for their nearby base in Aden. They practiced indirect rule, leaving the clan elders mostly in charge. As a result, English is the primary second language in the north, and the legal system has roots in British common law. While in the south, the Italians viewed this colony as a proper colony and a place for settlement. They built plantations, cathedrals, and they practiced direct rule, often suppressing clan structures in favor of Italian governance. Consequently, older generations in the south speak Italian, and the legal system was traditionally modeled on Italian civil law. Ethnically, the north is primarily Isak, including Dir and Dirot people, who were traditionally nomadic, and the south is primarily Haya, Darat, Dijo, and Mirafo, who are basically sedentary agriculturalists in the riverine fertile areas. These differences created two separate legal and cultural identities that would shape the century to come. A crucial, often overlooked fact is that Somaliland was once a fully recognized sovereign state. On June 26, 1960, Somaliland gained its independence from the British. For 5 days, it was a member of the international community, receiving recognition from over 30 countries, including the UK and USA. However, driven by the dream of a greater Somalia, the North chose to merge with the South on July 1st, 1960. From the beginning, the union was fraught with legal flaws and a growing sense in the North that their voices are being silenced by a Southern-centric government. In the late 1980s, the dream of union had turned into a nightmare. Under the brutal dictatorship of Siad Barre, the people of the North, especially the Isak clan, faced systematic oppression. The breaking point came in 1988, when the regime launched a devastating aerial bombing of the northern capital, Hargeisa. This atrocity resulted in tens of thousands of deaths and forced hundreds of thousands to flee. It was in this crucible of violence that resolve for independence was forged. In 1991, the central government in Mogadishu collapsed into civil war, and the people of the North seized this chance and took their destiny into their own hands. At the Burak Conference on May 18, 1991, traditional elders and political leaders made a historic decision. They formally rescinded the 1960 Union. They did not view this as a secession, but as a reversion to the independent state they had already legally held in June 1960. Today, Somaliland stands as a unique paradox. It possesses all the hallmarks of a functional state. It has its own currency, its own military, its own constitution, and democratic elections. Yet, it remains unrecognized by the international community, until Israel broke the norm. So why did Israel do that? To understand this, you have to understand that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is a man of resolve and plan. He's perhaps the wisest and most determined politician active in the world stage today. Behind every move of his, there is a purpose. And behind every purpose is his ambition to shield Israel from external threat for good. You see, on October the 7th, 2023, Hamas launched a surprise, unprecedented attack, breaking through the border fence into southern Israel. This attack resulted in the killing of roughly 1,200 people in Israel, mostly civilians, and the taking of over 200 hostages. Israel responded immediately by declaring state of war, and then began intense aerial bombing, followed by a massive deployment of ground troops in Gaza. The Israeli military initially focused on northern Gaza, urging Palestinian civilians to evacuate to the south for shelter and safety, as they searched for potential Hamas militants. Eventually, ground operations expanded to the south as well, as Israel pursued Hamas leadership and infrastructure. International negotiations involving the US, Egypt, and Qatar had been going on, trying to broker a lasting ceasefire and the release of all of the hostages, but the process is slow and difficult. And for a man as pragmatic and determined as Netanyahu, he can't allow something like this to happen again, and he wants to ensure Israel is 100% safe from future threats from Gaza. And to that end, no Hamas presence will be allowed to remain in Gaza, north or south. Question is, it's practically impossible to distinguish a Hamas militant from a Palestinian civilian. That leaves only one option to go: large-scale relocation of the entire Palestinian population out of Gaza. But where? Neighboring countries, including Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria, neither of them is willing to accept 2 million refugees mingled with Hamas militants, which is understandable given the history. You see, following the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon hosted a massive influx of Palestinian refugees, and over time, these refugee groups established independent militias and became deeply involved in the internal political and military affairs of their host countries. In Jordan, Palestinian armed factions eventually challenged the authority of King Hussein, leading to a violent military crackdown and their eventual expulsion. In Egypt, many Palestinians aligned themselves with the Muslim Brotherhood, a domestic opposition group, which resulted in their eventual deportation under President Hosni Mubarak. In Kuwait, despite its small population of slightly over 600,000, the country hosted a large Palestinian community. However, during the 1990 Iraqi invasion, Palestinian leadership supported the invaders, forcing the Kuwaiti government to expel the refugees en masse after the war. Because of these unpleasant experiences, neighboring Arab nations today view the large-scale intake of Palestinian refugees as a major national security and political risk. But Netanyahu is a man who doesn't give in easily. If the neighboring countries won't take in the Gaza refugees, why not try somewhere farther away, like in Africa? You see, the population density in Gaza is over 5,000 people per square kilometers. For Israel, it's 460, and Lebanon, 560. Somaliland, on the other hand, has a land area of approximately 1,076 square kilometers, or 68,000 square miles, and only a population of 6 million. That translated to a population density around 30 people per square kilometers. If Gaza is madly overpopulated, then Somaliland is insanely underpopulated. Taking in another 2 million people isn't much of a challenge for Somaliland. And in return, Somaliland gets recognized by another country for the first time in 60 years, plus huge economic benefits paid by Israel. Somaliland is one of the poorest economies in the world. Its GDP per capita is less than $600 as of 2023. Therefore, the economic incentive that Israel could potentially offer will be hugely attractive to Somaliland government. Economically, Israel may pay a hefty price to relocate 2 million people to 2,000 kilometers away, but because its major economic hubs like Tel Aviv will be permanently safe from surprise attacks, they will become much more investable in the long run, and Israeli people will understand that. I'm sure that Netanyahu will find a way to convince the Israeli people to approve the spending. If this was done, it would be sealed. Once the entire Palestinian population is moved out of Gaza and relocated to Africa, there will be no way to move them back ever. And Israel will face no more threats from inside Gaza. No breaching of borders, no rockets launched from Gaza, ever. This will completely change the security landscape for Israel and allow them to focus more on the northern side. and it would become the greatest strategic feat ever accomplished by any politician in modern history. Netanyahu's approval ratings would be so high that not only he won't go to prison for alleged corruption, but he will go down in history as Israel's second Moses.